Greetings, welcome, hey y'all! And to my peeps, sac passe. I'm Herdyne Mercier, your chief grief crusader, and I am in the building this afternoon. It's noon in Florida. Hey, John! Request, oh yes. Oh, my. I gotta tell you, welcome. Welcome. John, welcome to the grief seat, okay?
The green seat. I love it. I love it. You're good with this. It's so good.
Welcome to the grief seat. And I got to tell you, John, everyone that I talk to, starting from my husband, us keeping it real about grief and marriage, to my Peter P sisters from Africa to California, all over the world, from getting a male's perspective. Sometime this week, I've been talking about grief probably over 30 hours in between interviews, podcast interviews, breaking it down, just talking about grief.
Sure.
You the one I really didn't want to talk to.
No. You gotta talk. You gotta talk to the people about faith and grief. It's important. It's critical.
I know. You know why, John? Why I really want you. I talk to everybody. People in Africa about grief this week. People in California from a male's perspective in grief. I learned so much.
Yeah, your husband, Dr. Mercier, you guys were incredible.
All of them, but you. I struggled in this department till I came to a place with restoration. That's my truth.
I hear you. You got to be true.
You know, that's my truth. I struggled in that department of redefining grief in God and having it make sense. So before we even get into it and talk about it, John, can you please tell the people who you are besides being my childhood friend?
I know. And let me tell you, Herdyne has been a ball of joy forever. She's always been full of light. And I know she's got her own journey, her own story. But my name is, it's very true. And what you and your husband did the other night was just phenomenal to have two clinicians sharing and a couple. I really appreciated that. So I'm glad to be here. I see some of my home people, my home girl, Pastor Latoya from Indiana. I want to say greetings to her, and saw a couple of others. I missed the names, but glad you guys are here. But my name is John T. Boston II. That's my whole name. That's my government name. And I am the Associate Director for the North American Division Evangelism Institute. And I see Lori Diaz from Affinity Chapel in Ohio. Good to see you, Lori. My role, I'm responsible for identifying methods and ways to share the gospel in the United States, Canada, Bermuda, and Guam and Micronesia.
Woo! That sounds like a lot. You know, I have to ask, because there was a time in my life that I was taking care of everyone else. The kids, the husband, the mom, the dad, the siblings, and I forgot to wear my mask. And I just hope that you're in this role and you're doing God's work, but you got to remember to wear your mask.
Sure, to protect yourself. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot. You're doing the good work, but guess what? At the end of the day, when God calls you home, nobody's gonna. I work at a funeral home now. I have years of doing that, and nobody, I have never seen anybody stay at the gravesite. So my friend, my childhood friend, my schoolmate, please remember to wear your mask.
I appreciate that. I receive it.
Okay. And so I struggled in this department, John, like this grief thing and redefining grief. Hey, hello. Please type in your city where you're watching from. And redefining grief, I talk about it on my podcast. Redefining grief. We got to redefine grief. And I just, in my own grief, in my own sorrow, in my own time of going from hell to purpose, in my own time of questioning God, why did you give me life?
Sure. Yeah. Wow. That's terrible.
You know, in those dark times, in my time when I was just in the shower crying or in my car, could not figure it out. I had the good husband. I had the amazing kids. I have the house, which you can, with the white fence, y'all.
I hear you.
And I still did not have purpose.
Mm.
It caused an internal turmoil, John.
Sure. I get it.
I struggled because I talked to God. I'm like, are you not listening? And
Yeah.
I have to be honest here, John. I even asked God, am I cursed? When I think about stuff saying from generation to generation, I'm like, am I going to be able to break this?
Yeah.
You know? So in sitting in the grief seat today, John.
Yeah.
Help a sister out. I'm out of it now,
I tell you.
But there is another sister out here who's going through the same thing that I'm going through.
Sure. And I'm grateful for everybody that's tuning in now. The incomparable Guru Shauna Smith, amazing minister of God, of heaven, and ambassador. And she deals with this a lot as well. But one thing I think when you talk about redefining grief, and I had to come to this place, my baby cousin Jewel is on. I had to come to this place, Herdyne, and I had to, there's a term called cognitive dissonance. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a clinician, okay? I provide some level of spiritual counseling. But this idea of cognitive dissonance, it occurs when your reality comes in contact with a different truth. And I think that we experience cognitive dissonance as believers, as people of faith, and people who are interested in faith when our ideas about God come in contact with a truth that is not reality. And that reality is this. There is no scripture in the holy writings of Christian faith, the Bible. This is what we go to. There is no scripture that says you will be beyond the pain of this world. It does not exist. As a matter of fact, the idea that I'm blessed when I get the house and I'm favored when I get the car, and look at what God has done when this good thing happens, it's rooted in an idea that's something Christians would call Pharisaical. You see, the spiritual leaders of Jesus' day, they taught people that God is good to you when everything is going good. And that's just not the truth. God's love is not about how good things are. You're in a relationship. You're married. How many of you know that the goodness of your relationship, it is not measured by things always going well? That's not what measures.
Okay, stop right here. Let me train the audience right now. You're in the grief seat and you're giving me pows. And what is a pow? Pow is just basically saying pearls of wisdom. When John drops a pow, this is when you operate with hearts and you just tell them in the chat, pow. That's all you need to say so we know that we got it. You going too fast.
I love it, pow.
Listen. You in the grief seat. So, John, where were you when I was going through my trials?
I was going through mine.
Thank you for your truth. You were going through yours. And you know what? I needed to go through mine too. Because at the end of all of that hell, at the end of all of that pain, at the end of me asking all these daunting questions, God, have you left me? Did I do something? You know, after asking all those questions, I've come to find out I needed to go through the process.
Yeah. And it's a journey. It's a painful journey. Yeah.
So, I wanted to say that this is what I was saying. I was saying that when I was going through those moments, and now I've developed how to redefine grief, and I really had stepped away from God, if I'm to tell the truth. Because I felt like, well, if he ain't going to listen, I might as well try to figure out this life all by myself. And what I found is y'all don't do that. Don't do that. Hey, my people's from Africa. Type in where you're from. And so that struggle, and I was saying what happened was in talking to in school for talking too much, but what happens is you go deeper when you begin to ask questions.
Sure.
And going deeper and just hearing
Yeah.
some of the questions that I've asked God, and I know with your experience, your individuals ask questions too. What I want to know is, and I get this all the time, I have prayed for an answer. I have prayed. Let me define grief for you all. Grief is not just the death of someone. Grief is any emotional loss that you've had. It could be your hair.
That's right.
You went from hair to no hair. But your hair had identified you because as a little girl, you were told your hair is your beauty. Your hair is your crown. And now alopecia is at the front door. So you have to grieve that, who you are. Okay? Redefining grief.
That's right.
Redefining grief is not just the death. I have to remind you, it's the job. It's getting a call that you have cancer. Oh my God, internal order is getting a call that your son may now be going to prison for 25 years. Grief is saying, I just had this newborn and I'm grieving my old life before the child has entered my life. I'm grieving now the sleepless night. So grief is just not just, and I talk about it all on the podcast, Redefining Grief. It is not just the death of someone. And so in giving you that parameter and giving you that area of it's vast. But I always get this one same question. And it is, I prayed for God to heal my husband and he didn't. He died. I prayed for God to give my daughter a job and it did not happen. I prayed and I prayed. Just think of all the prayer requests and it does not happen. And thinking about this faith anchor, help me out here. How do we help those understand that question?
I won first and foremost. I see my big sister Hope. It's good to see you, Hope. But one thing I want to say, and it's good to see you, Shula, all the way from Zambia. Appreciate you so much. Beautiful country there. I think that when we're dealing with grief and we come in contact with faith, we have to redefine our perspective of God. God is not what we have been taught as children, that when you pray, God will answer your prayer. That's not really, there's no linear way to approach how God deals with humanity. It's very different. It's not sporadic. It's just that God's care for us and his love for us, it's showered down in a world that's full of rebellion and it's full of sickness and it's full of fear. As a matter of fact, in Jesus' ministry, if you look at his ministry, oftentimes you find him trying to alleviate the pain and the hurt of others, trying to find people that are despondent and lost and grieving. I can't get into the water, and that's where my healing is. Jesus said, no, your healing's right here. I've got a daughter that's sick. Can you come and help? Well, she's just asleep. No, she's dead. No, she's just asleep. I am, Jesus said, the resurrection and the life. You think about the lepers who everyone said, don't touch. Jesus reached out and he touched, or he spoke. And the blind man on the side of the road, Bartimaeus, even Zacchaeus, who is grieving that he doesn't have the inner peace that he wants. And he's just trying to get a glimpse of Jesus. And the truth of the matter is that Jesus is not a God of people that have it together. It's the opposite of that. We live in a world where death will come. Sickness will come. The floods will come. But like David said, and I'm not preaching, I'm just trying to reframe how we look at God. If it had not been for the Lord who was on our side, where would we be? In other words, David, who's this man after God's heart, full of all types of darkness, he's saying, I'm in this world. This world has done a number on me. It's tried to destroy me. Now, this is how bad it is, and I have God. Can you imagine how bad it would be if I didn't have him? And this is what the enemy does. Our hearts are deceitfully wicked. I mean, our hearts will lie to us. It is a terrible lie to say follow your heart, because your heart will always lead you down a very, very dark, lonely road. We were by design people of community. And the first thing we do when we're hurting is we withdraw. We pull away. And then the next thing that we do is we begin to question, because our idea about God has now been challenged. God, I thought you have the power to heal. Yeah, he has the power to heal. He didn't say he will always heal. And that's okay. That's all right. You know why that's all right? Because the promise that God gave us is that there's nothing that will separate us from his love. Not that we won't experience trial, but there's nothing that will separate us from his love. I have an 8-year-old daughter. I cannot stop my daughter from experiencing the hurt that this world will bring. The only thing that I can do without fail is I can love her without measure. I can constantly be there for her. But this is where the faith is important and significant, because Christ does promise, and I hate when people say, I don't want to spiritualize it, but I'm going to say it. I don't want to spiritualize it, but spirituality is my reality, okay? Mm-hmm. He promises that there will come a
pow. No, pause. Can you say that is a pow? When you say, just slow it down from the people in the back who hard of hearing, John. Slow it down.
Spirituality is my reality.
He just gives us 45, 59 minutes. But Jesus, can you give us that again?
Spirituality is my reality.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there. Herdyne, let me tell you, I have for years, and I'll say this here, and I don't talk about this, but I struggle with a traumatic brain injury. I struggle with not being myself. Dr. Alvin Perry, I was in an academic program, and he said, do you know what your problem is? Your problem is that you're holding on to who you were and who you wanted to be. This is what Alvin Perry said. And I wish he were here today. But he said, you have to embrace who you are. And when you can embrace who you are, you can experience the beauty of being there in that moment, being present with what you have. And I think about it, that's really a biblical concept. When God came to Moses, he didn't say, Moses, I want you to lead people out of Egypt in the hundreds of thousands, potentially millions. He said, what do you have in your hand? And Moses says, I have a rod. That's all I have. And God wanted Moses to understand, I will use what you have. So guess what? God doesn't say you won't experience brokenness, but I will use what you have. If all you have is the brokenness, if all you have is the sense of loss, if all you have is the loneliness, give it to me. Throw it down at my feet, and I'll use that. And you'll see how my love will shine in your life. And I think that's the difference between the believer and the non-believer. I had a friend who decided to do some time without God. He said, you know what? I just don't want to pray. I don't want to preach. I don't want to sing. If I do something, if I hum a tune, if I play a song, I want to do it because I like it, not because I want to give God lordship in my life. And over the course of several months, he said, you know, I feel more free. I feel like less judgment, and I feel free to do. And I said, man, you know, that's really amazing. I said, how's your wife? Oh, well, you know, we decided we're going to go our separate ways. I said, well, that's interesting because you feel more free. Why are you going separate ways with your wife? Well, she was a person of faith, and I'm no longer a person of faith. And so she doesn't feel that we're equally yoked. I said, well, that's okay. Wow, that's significant. Well, how are your kids? Well, they're suffering with some stress, and we're having to use pharmaceuticals to help treat what they're experiencing. Well, that's weird, man. You said you feel so free. And I'm not saying that God is an opiate for the masses, okay? I'm not saying that. But then I said, well, what about your mental health? I know you're telling me spiritually you feel free. He said, well, I've had to take some antidepressants because of, and which some people have to get a chemical balance. And I absolutely support the medical treatment that you're experiencing. And faith is not subject to it, but it's not beyond it either. Okay. And so and I said, now you told me you felt free. Now, what do you mean you feel free when you've lost your wife, your children are experiencing a tremendous amount of trauma and stress, and you yourself are going through clinical treatment because you are overwhelmed with the sense of loss? What is it that you're exchanging here? And what he said to me, I'll never forget. He said, I'm exchanging doing what I want to do. I'm exchanging that for doing what God wanted me to do. But see, this is the problem. The idea that God doesn't want us to be happy is erroneous. The idea that he doesn't want us to be at peace is in error. What he says is that you're going to mourn, but there's a blessing in the morning, because that's where you'll be comforted.
John, let me tell you, quick version. If you want to hear the full version, go to Redefining Grief podcast. It's called My Story, My Purpose. I have been attending funerals since I was 7 years old, addicted, like an addict from a child. Why? I didn't know why. My parents would say someone died at the church, a family member died. I had to be there. And it wasn't until 3 years ago I came across this scripture that says, death is the destiny of everyone, and the living shall take it to heart.
That's right.
Oh my God. Death is the destiny of everyone, and the living to take it to heart. It is better to go to a house of mourning than it is to a house of feasting. Let me tell you, so it basically is saying it is better to go hang out at a funeral than go to a house party. I've done both. Wow. I like both. I love to dance. I love to have a good old time living my best life. But let me tell you something, John. In reading that scripture, I got it. I got what I was doing as a child. I got what I was doing. I was going to these funerals and I saw, oh, that lady got in the casket because her man the man choked her to death. That would never be me. I would never be in that relationship. This family, these 5 caskets, I can see the church. I can see the white casket. Grandma, 4 grandkids. What happened to them? House fire. Ooh, baby, I will never play with matches. So what was happening to me is I was going to these funerals and gathering a lesson.
Yeah.
I was driving 3, 4, 5 hours to a funeral of individuals I did not know. Why? To get a lesson.
Yeah.
And so
a lesson,
now I'm
a lesson and a blessing.
Go ahead.
No, I said a lesson and a blessing. There is, God draws close to the brokenhearted. And this is where we fail as faith practitioners, as faith leaders. We have got to stop telling people it's going to be all right. At some point in the future, ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, God will repair what is broken. But right now, today, I don't need to hear that it's going to be all right. I am suffering. I am lost. I am in a dark place. And I don't need to hear that. What I need to know is I need you to acknowledge that I'm here. And I need to be reminded that God is there with me. He is hurting with me. He is in pain with me. He is with me. That's why he said, go ahead, my child, and mourn. There's a blessing for you. If Satan is going to bring loss, then I am going to bring a blessing. And how many of you know that the blessings of God always outshine the curses of Satan? People talk about generational curses, but what they don't talk about is the truth and the fact that the blessings of God will last much longer than the curses of Satan ever will. And we have to begin telling the people of faith, you go to counseling, you go to the chief grief crusader, you go to Mercier Wellness, you go and you talk to them and let them journey with you and remind you you are not alone. And that's the blessing of mourning. We find comfort. But if, as a believer, and listen to me closely, I'm not preaching, I'm saying this as a person who has mourned, as a person who is mourning things in my life. I want you to understand that unless you can acknowledge it, unless you can speak it and say it, I am broken. I cannot fix this. This is beyond me. This is not what I want. I am hurting. Unless you can do that, you will not experience the comfort of heaven. It will not come. The comfort comes when you acknowledge the hurt.
Oh, you just preached you just preached. I'm sorry. In the grief seat, you just preached. Now, let me tell you, you just said my whole philosophy and my whole anchors and all the download God has given me and my assignment and my purpose in helping moving people from grief to purpose. From grief to purpose. Join the masterclass. You can register right there. It goes down tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And basically, I'm going to be teaching you everything about grief, the truths, the myths. And one of the myths is for whatever reason. Tonight, as I break down those things, give you the in the day. It is over. And
Sure.
their lives. Had a voice. I swear I sound like Whitney, but today, because all of the grief talk I've been doing this week is a little gone. I can probably get just a sound. That's it. You can get right. I dance, all my character, that is done. Once I hear it is finished. But at the end of the day, I will be okay with it because death is the destiny of everyone. And if death is the destiny of everyone, we all have an assignment. My assignment is to get people from grief to purpose. John's assignment is to help broken hearts heal from the pulpit. But he had to mourn. He had to have a funeral service of his heartache. The stuff you've talked to God to, John. And in sitting in this chair, in sitting in this grief chair today, John, what have you found to be your truth in your own personal journey of healing?
I'm constantly, I was sharing earlier, I deal with this traumatic brain injury and I have to embrace this new me. I have to identify fresh limits. I think that when we grieve, we don't understand that our limits have changed. It's just like when you open a new package, you may be able to get everything back in the box, but it won't go back in the way that you took it out. And that's a challenge for us as humans. We try to, people talk about holding on to the good old days, or I remember when. The truth of the matter is that the goodness of the day is not determined by the past, but how we frame the past. It's how we view those experiences. And our mind wants to hold on to good things that actually weren't that great. And so we have to understand that we can create new goodness in our current place. And so that's a truth that I've had to embrace in my mourning. I've had to understand that I'm not bound by what I've lost. I'm bound by the opportunity that I have for gain, and the opportunities that I have for growth, the opportunities that I have so that's really important to me. I'm okay at this point in my life if I say I need a nap. I used to feel bad, like I'm not being productive. If I tell people I need it, I'm like, no, I'm going to take a nap because I have new limits. And that nap is needed for me to be the best person I want to be. And so that's really important. Now, a nap is a small thing, but there are other limits. I practice no. I practice no a lot. People say, can you do this? No, I can't do that. I don't have the bandwidth to do that. And I want to do things well. And I want to feel good about myself and what I bring to the table. And so if someone asks me to do something, if I can't do it well, I say no. If I can't do it with everything in me, I say no. So that's one thing. And I accept failure in a different way. If I set a goal for myself and I don't accomplish that goal because I have a new set of a new perspective, a new sense of who I am, and I've got to learn more about myself. If I set a goal and I don't make it, I have to be confident that I did everything I could. And so I try not to overpromise and underdeliver. I try to only do those things that I can do well. And when I fail, personally, I make sure I am failing because of someone else's expectation, not because of my effort.
You know,
I'm letting people hit that. I'm letting people hit that. I want you to understand that. I'm okay if you're not satisfied, as long as I'm satisfied that I did everything that I could. And that's a new thing for me because I was adopted when I was a child. I have a sense of rejection about me in my mind. It's deep down in my DNA. And so I have to be mindful of that. And so there are things that set me off and make me feel like I'm not enough or good enough. And so I have to, when people aren't satisfied with something I've done, whether it's family or friends or coworkers, I say, that's okay. I did what I could. I gave it everything I had. And I'm not going to feel bad because I couldn't give you more than you expect. Your expectations need to be evaluated, not my effort. And we have to accept that when we're experiencing loss, because when we're experiencing loss, we want to win. We want to accomplish. That's why when we grieve, oftentimes we get in a bed, we close the windows. We can easily eat. We can easily watch movies or binge watch a show. But what we're doing is we're trying to comfort ourselves with minimal wins. We basically with a minimal win. And it doesn't take much for me to win this. I can get through this 10 seasons over the next 3 days. But what I try to do is I try to step out and say, you know what? I did everything I could. My cousin said, effort does not equal expectation. That's right. Effort does not equal expectation. I think I've heard you say that before, cousin. Yeah.
I got to tell you, John, the other day you did a sermon. I was probably up at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And it was Sabbath morning.
Because you have too much energy to ever sleep. Or you probably sleep on like 30 minutes a day.
I literally get like 5 hours, and that's literally forced it. And it's not, I'm just purposeful living, y'all. I'll sleep when I die in a sense, but I'm trying to be good to my body and get rest. But I get up when I have enough rest. Now, there was my dark days, John. I would have been in the bed 15, 16 hours straight. So I'm good now. Yeah. So I'm good now. I can get my 4 hours and keep it moving. And the other day, it was 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. I saw you had a sermon up on Facebook, and I started watching it. I have to be honest. When you said you were adopted, I stopped the video. And I did a life review of your family, your mom, your dad, and your sister. And I'm like,
yeah,
I would have never put that together. I saw the love.
Sure. Lots of love. Lots of love.
Lots of love. I never knew that. And I was like, wow. And I'm like going back to our district days. And I'm like, I never, ever saw that reality that you were adopted. I could have never put it together.
My parents did a brilliant job raising us the way they did, the way they loved my sister and I. It was, we never felt adopted. You just internally, as you grow, you experience the sense of rejection. And as you experience that, you grow into it differently. In my life, some people aren't comfortable talking about these things. I've learned that I have to mention it if I want to manage it.
I have to mention it. Now that is a pow. There is something, and that's my very first anchor that I teach in my development of getting you from grief to purpose. Number one, you got to tell the truth about your heartache. The truth.
Yeah.
You have to sit in that truth, however ugly it is. Because if you do not sit in that truth will eat you up alive. You will have that false illusion that you're handling it. The second anchor that I teach is after truth, you got to talk about that heartache. You were molested. Yeah. Your dad or your mom or whoever it is has abandoned you. You have to tell those truths, those heartaches. Whatever brought you heartache, you have to open it up with truth. And you have to find skillful people who will hear you, see you, validate your emotions without ever judging you.
Yeah.
And that third anchor that I teach is good connection. Who are you connected to? Do they see you? Do they hear you? And do they validate your emotion? Or do they help pacify your behavior? That fourth anchor that I wrestled with and I had a hard time bringing you to the chair, but I had to be obedient, is that faith anchor. Yeah. I'm good now. I'm good now, you know? Yeah. And then that fifth anchor is talking about restoration. And you hit that fifth anchor so good. People have a hard time with restoration because they're trying to restore back to what was, not what is.
That's right.
They have not had a funeral service.
That's the hardest. Yeah, that's the hardest for me. You're trying to, and sometimes, Herdyne, it's not that they're trying to relive what's in the past, but they had an expectation that was developed in the past, and they're trying to hold on to that and bring that expectation forward, and that's what causes the cognitive dissonance. It's not there. Tamara Bodie is on. That is my homegirl, another Floridian. Tam, it's good to see you. Herdyne, one of the things when you talk about these anchors, I love that you talk about anchors, and it's a language that you've taught me. I use that language now in my personal and professional life. The things that centered. Yeah. You are the master class on grief, and I am confident that you'll be counseling presidents and prime ministers and ambassadors in the days ahead.
Don't the ugly cry, please.
Don't do the ugly cry. Just let tears fall like a good old mother in the church. Don't do the ugly cry. But I went to one place at the World Trade Center, the new World Trade Center, and I went to visit the memorial there for America's greatest strike on American soil and the sense of loss. And I had to do some research after I left there. It was a very sober experience, and even their micro mourning. There's something called micro mourning. There's a sense of loss that we experience as members of community when unarmed African American is shot and killed by someone in authority or someone with a weapon, and it's seemingly no reason. All of these things add up. Watching the news, seeing all of the hundreds of thousands of lives lost and affected by COVID-19. These things are added on top of your very personal and direct sense of loss. And so it's important to talk about those things and try to decompress. But I learned something, and I want to share this with you. And this is something that is a truth for me. And when I say a truth for me, this is something when I face something, when I'm facing internally things that I don't really want to deal with, when I don't really want to acknowledge, I tell myself that I want to rise and I want to grow and I want to shine. I want to be in a place of significance where I can be a support to others, as people of significance have supported me. Every person has significance. And so one of the things I learned is that the higher the building, the deeper the foundation. The higher the building, the deeper the foundation. And so one thing that you have to understand is that you've got the more you want to rise, the higher you want to go in life, whether it's professionally, because a lot of people are hurting professionally right now, whether it's personally, because a lot of people are feeling this overwhelming tide of loss and grief right now because things aren't exactly where they want them to be. Whether you've got to consider this, the higher you want to go, for every 10 levels you've got to go up, you need to go down one level. You need to uncover the things, like Herdyne said, the truth. You need to speak that. You need to acknowledge that there was something taken from you when you were a child. There was something taken from you on that date that no one had business taking from you. There was something done to you. It was inflicted on you. And because it was inflicted on you or done to you, now you've got a frame of the world that needs to be adjusted. And the only way you will rise above it is if you can go dig under it and uncover it. And I want you to understand how significant that is. You've got you will never, my friend, you will never be at the height you want to go unless you are willing to go through the depths that are within you. And that's a really important truth and an anchor for me.
It's so true. It is so true. You know, my 9-year-old at the time, my 10-year-old, she just became 10, April 26th, tomorrow. At the time, she was probably 7. She did a drawing. And I have it on my Instagram. Scroll down, and you'll see this drawing of a heart and squiggly rounds. And the words she wrote, you know, as parents, we get all these papers and drawings, and I don't keep them all. That's my truth.
Yeah,
but
sure.
This one I kept. Because she wrote a message so profound that I did a whole podcast episode on it. Messy on the outside, but cute on the inside, John.
Wow.
Before Instagram kick us off at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
I want us to talk about the mask that people are wearing. That mask where they dress up. They put on the lashes, women. Men put on that nice suit. They're driving the name brand, you know, BMWs in the big house, but they ugly on the inside and cute on the outside. Help me teach this from a biblical perspective, John, as far as what my daughter taught me in a drawing. Messy on the outside, but I'm cute on the inside.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's good to see Javerne on. Javerne's amazing. She's married to a Floridian, so I love these Floridians. Oh my goodness, I miss you guys so much.
Linda just came on. My cousin.
Oh, good to see you. I love it. I love it. Let me tell you, I know that we were told that Christians act a certain way, and my God, it is a truth that we should be salt and light. And what that means is that we should be different. When it's dark, we should shine. But the challenge is that we don't, hey, what's up, girl? We do not accept that shining doesn't mean that we look like we've got it all together. It's actually the opposite of that. If you look closely in scripture, the holy scriptures of the Christian faith, if you look closely, heaven is attracted to those that are inadequate by man's standard. And so let me give an example here. It's one of my favorite examples, okay? There was a prophet who was sent by God to choose the next king of Israel. The first king of Israel, this is history, okay? But it's also biblical because the Bible doesn't contradict history. The first king of Israel was chosen because of his height, his stature, his standing in the community, how he looked on the outside. Mm-hmm. And you can literally see when the Spirit of God leaves him. His name was Saul because he turned his back on God, because he was so messed up on the inside. But that's what the people wanted, because they realized they were choosing someone based on how he looked and where he came from. But let me tell you something. When God chose the king for them and he sent the prophet Samuel to go and choose the king, the father of the house, Jesse, put all of his boys out, and they were tall, and they were hunters, and they were warriors, and they were manly men, okay? And they had the capacity to lead a nation for sure. And so the prophet was going to choose one, and God said, no, that's not the one. Ask Jesse if there's another. So he said, is there? And he said, I only have one other son, and he's a shepherd. He's inadequate. He's inadequate. The prophet Samuel said, go and get him. He poured oil on him. He anointed him. That boy became the king of Israel. He became the man after God's heart through his brokenness, through his sense of rejection, through his running, through his rejection. He had a heart for, he had God's heart because he kept coming back. He kept coming home. God was his anchor. God was his resting place. And here, when you talk about messy on the inside and pretty on the outside, or looking good on the outside, man, I just wish we could be honest in our churches. We got to stop making people feel like they have to have it together. Even when we choose our leaders in our church, we say, well, you can only be a leader if you're not struggling with anything. That means that we have leaders who are in leadership. They are lying in leadership because everybody's struggling with something.
Come on now, John.
Everybody.
Tell the truth.
Everybody. And we have to be honest. I was at a church in Australia, the Bay Community Church, amazing church. And they welcomed me as a part of their family. I served in other capacities, but they welcomed me as a part of their family. And Herdyne, I know this is dangerous to say because you and I come from the same place and we got the same kind of parents and the same kind of people. I know this is dangerous, but I'm going to say it. Do you know my favorite part of that church? My favorite part of that church was they had a bench outside of the front door where people could smoke and have a smoking break, because they were reaching people that had no faith experience. They were reaching people that didn't come from a background. And I remember one of those beautiful people said to me, man, I've come so far because this time last year I was strung out on heroin. To them, a cigarette is like being a Sabbath school teacher, okay? Or being a Sunday school teacher. And so the point that I'm making in that is that our churches have to be places where people can be honest about what they're struggling with. If somebody said, I'm struggling with pornography, they're ostracized, they're condemned. If somebody says, I'm dealing with alcohol, Christ is the victory, and he is the victory that overcomes the world, but we are not. Our victory is in Jesus Christ, and we have to accept people where they are. I'm not saying that we need to fast track them to preach and to lead out, but what I am saying is that our churches need to be a place where people can be honest about their journey without being condemned. Christ did not have people around him that were perfect or that had arrived at perfection. He had people around him that would not be converted until after he was gone.
You left me speechless, John.
No, I think in our faith communities, in all of our faith communities, we do a disservice when we paint a picture of God that is not accurate. And our God loves us. Does he love the sinner? Yes, he died so that sinners could have life. And that does not mean that we will not experience the pain and the frustration of this world. What it means is that we've got a promise, we've got hope, we've got opportunity to grow past it. And like David, I want us to always remember we have a place of comfort to come to when we do experience those things. And the challenge is that we leave God when we feel we don't need the comfort, and we leave God when we feel that he's not doing what it is we think he should do. But the truth of the matter is that God is not doing what we think he should do, but he's doing what he always does. And we have to be able to separate those two. And I think when you talk about faith and grief, the biggest challenge with faith and grief is that we act like they're two independent ideas. But in fact, listen to me closely, like draw in, like turn up your volume right now. Faith and grief are not independent. They are interdependent. You can't have true faith without grief. And you won't experience good grief unless you have faith.
Ooh, boy, you chopping up. Your grief seat is on fire, John. It's on fire. Your grief, you just so many pow-pows. I definitely have to. Y'all pray for me. If there's anybody out there, I lost 3 one today. Y'all pray. The truth of the matter is, Helinda came in here, my dear cousin, Helinda, is in here. She said the church needs to be a safe place. If people feel threatened, they will not open their hearts to hear your message from Christ. That's so true.
And the church is not a safe place. Why would I want to go to a church full of people that are acting like they've got it together because they've got God? I don't want a God that accepts me because I have it together. I want a God who accepts me and is going to repair my life, not a God who wants me when my life is already repaired. That's not reasonable. It doesn't even make sense cognitively.
Mm-hmm. But somehow there has been a mixed message that I can say, thinking about my time in the church, and let me tell my truth as a child, that the seeds were planted that we had to be perfect before we went to the cross. Can I just say that truth? Yeah. So there's a lot of redefining God loves that needs to happen. And I am going to say this for real. I can't. She says, we have let God to the healing and save and stop thinking we know what's best. So many people think they know other struggles. Yes, Lord, exactly. Please write that down, pal. Yes, so true. Yeah. Now, this is
I feel in my heart there's a book that you and I need to collaborate on. The Redefined Grief by a Redefined God. I just feel like that's coming.
Let me tell you something. You know, I'm in the lab right now working on my book. And
I know you're killing. You're always doing amazing.
Yes, you're amazing. I'm calling you. I hope you say yes.
All right.
It's me.
I still owe you one video. I owe you one video. I'm only one video behind. I get it done.
It's 3 minutes or less, John. 3 minutes. Can you find 3 minutes of your day so I can put it on the website? I can. Yes, you can. But you know what? I text you. I said, Grace. You got that, Grace.
Hallelujah.
Now, John, before they take us out, and you were so good, we're going to definitely write that chapter in my book together.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You got it.
I'm going to call you on that. The truth of the matter is, John, I want to see if we can, from a male's perspective, in June on the Redefining Grief podcast, I'm only having men.
That's amazing.
I'm only having men, and I want to hear from their grief experience. I was talking to Vlad one of my lives this week, grief from a male's perspective. And Vlad said, when I told him describe grief, he said his mama, his wife, and his daughter. And I pointed it out to him. Hold on. You did not name one male in your life, or not even yourself, in grieving. Wow. This flip note version. His response was, well, if a man shows emotions, they're weak. That's why in June, I'm only featuring men. But the truth of the matter is that I want that podcast series to say that men have emotions too, and we as women have to know how to stand or anchor down and support y'all when you all are hurting. But this is the final 5 minutes. This is your final word. What would you have tell the people if today was your last day?
Oh, Trina, it's good to see you. If today were my last day, I would tell you, if you are right now experiencing a sense of loss because of something you have not done yet, go and do it. I would tell you that if you are overwhelmed by feeling as though the system you're working in is not going to give you what you need to accomplish the vision that's in your heart, I would tell you leave that system and go and pursue what it is that is in your heart. Because if you do not leave, if you do not go do it, you will experience the greatest form of grief. And that is the sense of an inability to forgive oneself. And you don't want to live your life like that. I would tell you, if you are a person of faith, if you are a person and you're curious about faith, or you have an interest in faith, I would tell you faith is not defined by the faith community. Faith is defined by our experience with our Heavenly Father. And I assure you that his intentions for us are that we would understand that when we mourn, Matthew 5:4, there is comfort that is available for us. In other words, there's a blessing when you mourn. And I tell you that if this were my very last day on earth, it's okay for things to not be okay. You have got to be all right with accepting that if things are not where you want them to be, then things need to be done. You have to do something about it. Do you know why people don't do anything about the things that they want something done about? Do you know why? It is because they feel inadequate. You feel inadequate and you feel powerless to change your circumstance. And that is a lie that Satan has fed you. And the truth of the matter is that you are powerful beyond measure. There is nothing stopping you right now from picking up the phone and calling that person and saying, I'm moving forward with this plan. I'm stepping in this direction. I'm going to let go of what's been holding me back. And when someone says, what is it that's been holding you back? It's okay for you to be honest and say, me. I'm the only thing holding me back. The only thing stopping me was the fear of my inadequacy. And I want you to step out and know that it's important for you to go for that. If you have experienced trauma in your life, and I think most people have, there's a few fortunate people who have not. But if the point I am in my journey, I experienced trauma and I consider myself fortunate because as I experience trauma, I get to experience a great deal of triumph that would not have been available to me had I not gone through or am not going through what I go through. And so I don't just hold on to what I hope to have. I celebrate the moments that I have today. I celebrate every beautiful victory, everything that I can get done, I celebrate. And I want to encourage you in this, and as I sit in this grief seat, I want you to know that faith is not about being victorious over your grief. It is about being victorious in your grief. And I want you to leave this conversation, and I'm guessing that you tuned in because you may be experiencing a tremendous sense of loss. I want you to know, lean into it. Dig down into it, acknowledge it, speak it, experience that truth, and allow yourself to be anchored, because when you do that, you will be able to rise higher. And that's really where God is calling you. He's calling you to rise because you were able to dig in. That's the only reason he calls us to grow. He calls us to grow because he knows that when he calls us to grow, and we see that calling and we hear it, he knows it gives. He knows it's our opportunity to allow him to shine through and to flood our hearts and to uncover that hurt and pain and sense of inadequacy that we need to overcome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Herdyne. Sign up for her masterclass, HerdyneMercier.com/masterclass. Be a part of it. She redefines grief. She is the chief grief crusader.
Yes, and it's going down tonight, John. And I am going to be coaching people. I'm going to teach them about grief. The value is I don't steal people's time. I'm going to give you what you need and you decide. But I am going to be coaching people from grief to purpose. Nothing. No question. And if the question gets too hard, guess who I'm calling? I hope you answer, because I don't know all the things on faith, but what I'll tell you is I'm walking in obedience. I thank you, John, and this is what I want to say. For this life is not perfect, but the requirement of living it is. And not just living it by the side. I'm talking about purposeful living. I thank you so much. This was so good. And thank you for reminding me there is beauty in anchoring down in faith. I love you, brother. I will talk to you later, and I'm hoping I can get my 3 minutes today. My 3-minute video today.
Pray, church. Pray, church.
I'm praying.